Okay, ready? 1, 2, 3.
Welcome to Muay Thai Bones.
The next episode edition. Okay, so how do we start this normally? Normally, for new people new to the Muay Thai Bones, this is the most in-depth Muay Thai podcast in the universe, or as we say now, the multiverse.
Yes, all timelines, all possible
all timelines. Yeah. So we take deep dives into kind of like sociological, philosophical, sometimes historical, technical Muay Thai subjects. If you're not into the subject that we're on now, in about 30 minutes, you can just jump ahead to another topic, and be usually something quite different. And if you're watching this on YouTube, you can get the audio version as a supporter of the podcast.
As a patron.
As a patron. Even a $1 a month pledge gets you the audio podcasts, all of them, and gives you access to the Muay Thai Library, which is this insane documentary project that Sylvie's been doing now for almost 4 years, maybe more than 4 years. I should look at that. And there's over 120 hours of you training with legends and great crews of Thailand. We're like documenting the disappearing Muay Thai of Thailand, not just for you guys to study and become awesome in your gyms, but also so that these men and these techniques will be preserved for hopefully decades into the future.
A documentary project, it's archival, but it's also a library, so you learn from it. It's incredible.
And so what the way it works is Sylvie's learning from them, so you get to learn from them as Sylvie learns from them. There's really nothing like it. And it's just incredible how much we've been able to accomplish with the help of patrons. So if you are watching this on YouTube and you want to become a patron, you get access to the library.
Which is 120 hours now.
Over 120 hours of documented. And these sessions, you can watch them 3-4 times. We have people telling us they've watched a session 10 times. So right there, that's 10 hours in one session. Yeah. There's just so much because these men are so incredible. So anyways, not to make a commercial out of it, but just to let you guys know how the podcast works. Let's make a commercial out of it. I'm wearing my Carhartt shirt. This is an OG version, I think, that we made several years ago. I wear my Carhartt shirts all the time.
A lot.
When you get a Carhartt shirt, 100% of the earned profits go to him. And COVID is fucking smacking down gyms and legends and everybody who lives on the living fabric of Muay Thai. People like Carhartt, Diesel Noi, Yokumpan, who we have apparel of. If you buy their apparel, we're able to send them money like the next day.
Yeah.
So it's actually really, really supportive, like immediately supportive.
Yeah.
So this is the Carhartt shirt. We've got shorts by him. We have a shirt by about Diesel Noi, a drawing of mine, and we have a Yokumpan shirt.
And all the merchandise in the store, if it's not specific, like Carhartt goes to Carhartt, Yokumpan goes to Yokumpan, Diesel Noi to Diesel Noi. If it's not specific, it goes into the crew fund, which helps support all the crews and legends in the Muay Thai Library, like as a group.
Yeah, it gets distributed along with 10% of all the pledges on to your patron. 10% gets distributed in the crew fund. But so like Sylvie's apparel, stuff with her shirts with her face on it, or hats like this. Love my Sylvie hat. Chemical X. Yeah. Sylvie's new fight name. That all goes to the crew fund. So everything on that page, sorry to go on about this, is non-profit to us, 100%. Matter of fact, it's more than 100%, but because anytime something's bought, and Sylvie's like, how much do I send? We always round up. So round up, send more even than is like technically the case. Yeah. So it feels good to wear something, support somebody, and also send something forward in a great way, right?
Yes.
So, God, the podcast originally, and still is, once COVID straightens up, was us just talking in the car, driving across the country. And it's like, so these are natural conversations we have. And then we're like, we should just film them and record them and share them with everybody. This first topic was an actual conversation we started having. We just started riffing in this like crazy way, like we do sometimes.
Impromptu.
And so this subject is kind of like all over the place. Because I was like,
Yeah.
after we wrote this, after we were talking for like 40 minutes, it seems, I immediately wrote notes, and you should just see my notes. They're just phrases.
If you could meme Kevin with that like Charlie Day, with the, like,
What, bird law?
the, like different pictures with the red tape going between them.
Okay, here. This is what I wrote.
Are you gonna read it?
Yeah, these are my notes. Jimmy Page's Cashmere. MP3 compression. Johann Sebastian Bach. The Moy of King Rama IX of Thailand. Living through plagues historically. Spinoza, the philosopher. Cowboys and Indians. Horse-drawn carriages. Diesel Noi, only heard of back in the day. The 2001 monolith, I don't even actually know why I wrote that one. Walter Benjamin's Angel of History. The music of creation. And tooth marks on fighters. Okay.
Yeah, so Kevin read that to me, and it was kind of like
It was like we
this
woke
weird
like you
free
had a dream.
association where like I just have these ideas, and I was able to thread out a few of them.
Well, the things that we mention back and forth,
But they sounded crazy.
they do sound crazy.
Like that.
It sounds crazy. It's like a dream that we had or something.
It's like my grandma's house, but it wasn't my grandma's house. Yeah, like that.
Totally. Okay, so, oh man. So as you can tell, this is a little bit all over the place, but there's a lot of great ideas in here. And yes, Muay Thai of Thailand is buried at the bottom of this heap of ideas.
Yeah.
How do we enter this? Let's enter it through.
You gonna do Rama 9?
Yeah. Just give me a minute.
He's got to recover.
All right, we'll start this way. We love watching documentaries, and we've seen some interviews with Jimmy Page, Led Zeppelin.
Yeah.
And Jimmy Page, not only a great rock guitarist, historically great, one of the greatest ever, he always is like, yeah, but what I was really good at was producing the albums. He is like, I created a sound for Led Zeppelin that he kind of never got credit for in a weird way. And what he talks about a lot is how he built up volume, dimensionality, I don't know what's the word for it, in the tracks as he.
Well, it's composition. It's like true composition.
Well, he orchestrated it, but also tried to produce a sense that if you're listening to the music in a space, in a room, you would hear like the locations of things.
Yeah.
And the spatial structure of the music was very important to him. And he basically complained that everything is now compressed to MP3 files. And it's just like the music of Led Zeppelin is now gone.
Yeah. It's music that is composed and performed for like an amphitheater or for like
It's a huge stadium.
just.
For size,
Yeah.
but spatially.
And then you want to make it
vast.
fit in a like compressed folder. You do not get that dimension of sound. You can't get that dimension of sound.
And then not only that, but you've taken the music of the, like, let's say early 70s, where all this effort was put forth to construct a sound volume, which was the big rock volume.
Yeah.
And then you've compressed it. So now when a 15-year-old listens to Led Zeppelin, they literally are not even listening to Led Zeppelin anymore. But not only that, people, once MP3 and compression comes along, people no longer compose the music for volume.
Right.
No longer the things that were happening in the studio with Jimmy Page and whomever your favorite band is of the era, they wrote the music and they orchestrated the music and they laid the tracks of the music in order to create volume. Now there would be no reason to do that. So actually the constructions of music is not only can you not even hear Led Zeppelin anymore, you can't even hear it. Now there's nothing even remotely connected to it because the composition needs are very different because listening is very different. And for us, we're like, wow, this is right down the alley of the compression of golden age great fights. One, into the YouTube videos, right? So you don't even see the whole fight. You don't see the whole volume anymore. You just see highlights. And then now with the rise of entertainment Muay Thai in Thailand, 3-round fights, time is literally compressed.
Yeah. Well, you have this in Western boxing as well. They used to go like 25 rounds, and now like a championship fight is like 10 rounds.
That was a very long time ago, yeah.
Yeah, but you can totally imagine the difference between I'm preparing for a 25-round fight versus fighting a 10-round fight. Like, those are insanely different things.
Okay.
Okay, you don't care. But
no, I lost the next step.
Well, something that we talked about in our original conversation about the compression, and something that you mentioned about like a 15-year-old kid finding Led Zeppelin on iTunes now and listening to it, they're not hearing what Led Zeppelin actually wrote. I've never heard them live, but we've heard older Led Zeppelin, so our brains kind of make up for it even when we hear the cheaper version.
Yeah, but so if you heard Led Zeppelin if you're around my age, and maybe even less Sylvie's age, but we heard the more filled out version. So when you hear like an AM radio version of something or a very flattened out thing,
the like single earbud, like
the single, yeah, totally, totally. You hear the cat. That's why I wrote down Kashmir.
Yeah.
You hear that Kashmir line,
yeah,
and your brain builds out the rest of the volume.
Yeah.
Even if there's no bass in your little earbud, the bass comes in.
Yeah, there's like an echo.
There's a dimensionality that comes in. And so, I don't know, I get this, I don't know this for a fact, but I get this feeling like in the vast internet Muay Thai community where like the people are always like, Muay Thai today is not like it was in the old days, and like complaining about this. And so there is this dimension of loss that we're talking about, but it's a subtler version of loss that's happening, which is we cannot even access the golden age fights anymore. We try to build out the volume of them, like rounds 1 and 2 aren't even in the fight videos, but we don't even have the references to reconstruct the fuller volume off of the MP3 that is happening. Like even in the YouTube versions, but then when you go to like 3-round compression fights where they're not even fighting Muay Thai anymore, it's basically kickboxing with elbows. You have, I want to trace out a little bit of this sense of loss. And this is where Johann Sebastian Bach comes in. There's a book on consciousness by philosopher Daniel Dennett, who's a philosopher of consciousness. I don't remember what book it is, and unfortunately I'm not going to be able to put it in the reading notes. But he made this point that the work of Johann Sebastian Bach is actually filled with the quotational material of ecclesiastical music that everyone knew, because everyone went to church. Everyone heard the hymns of the day.
It's like sampling.
Well, I'm not even sure if it's sampling, but he is extracting out music from the culture that then people who listened to Johann Sebastian Bach at the time would then fill in the blanks of all the associations he's quoting from. And so he's saying today, when you listen to the Bach, you can't even hear the music. Like, he wrote those notes, But because you've lost the experiential qualities that surrounded those notes, you can't even build out the world that he's referencing. You can still be moved by it. You can still be moved by Karahat's shoulder shake or something like this. These are beautiful notes being played, but already the history has been stripped away from it. And his point was like, if I'm listening to Bach as a contemporary listener and somebody in the past was listening to it, different parts of our brain would be firing. Like, it's not like note per neuron. There is an entire family of associations. And so I guess part of this is really about how we've already lost much more than we even realize that what we've lost. It's not just that fighters of today no longer are capable of fighting the way Samart fought or Karahat. It's also that because they're composing other music for new mediums, like composing for MP3 playback or earbuds, right? It's also that when those fighters were fighting, there were references that surrounded them and everything that are just gone. Like, only people who lived at that time could hear it, could see it. They can see it now in a YouTube clip, but we can't see it.
Yeah.
And so for me, there's like an additional sense of loss that's like, that we want to, part of what we do is not just complaining that things are being lost, but taking notes on what is lost or threatened to be lost so that we can make choices to save it to some degree, or say we don't have the energy, means, or time, or funds, or whatever to save it. But to me, what's really sad is to lose things that are unnoted. Like you don't even realize you lost it. Instead, make decisions. It's like a lifeboat. What are you going to put in the lifeboat for the future?
Or like a time capsule.
Or a time capsule. But it's like you don't want the time capsule empty.
Yeah.
And so there was this feeling, I guess, when we were talking about, I don't know. I feel like I walked myself off into a side thing that you're not enthused about.
What this included a discussion about Diesel Noi and how even during his time, because he kind of crosses from the end of the silver into the very beginning of the golden age.
Yeah.
He was young when that was happening. Is that his idols and like his references and like who he thought was amazing are from way before what we can even access, because there's not video of Silver Age fighters really.
Very little. There's some, but not.
But he's the type of man who's like always giving reference. So he's constantly pulling these references with him all the time.
Yeah.
And even Hippie in our third library session with him, he actually tells a story about how he would steal from fighters. He would watch Diesel Noi and steal something that Diesel Noi had done. And so that's pulling the references. But why Diesel Noi is such a strange or beautiful example of that is that Diesel Noi himself had no footage. Like, there's not a lot of footage of Diesel Noi, but everyone knew who he was from like a photograph in a newspaper. And so the reference of Diesel Noi is actually largely word of mouth, or like how people talked about him. Like the legend of Diesel Noi was not, I saw him and now I'm talking about this. It's the way everyone talked about him. One
of our patrons who actually saved the Holy Grail fight with him for Samart. Otherwise, there would be no fight of Diesel Noi as a peak fighter in existence that is publicly known. So, well, how do you connect that up with what we're talking about, things being lost? Like,
well, it's something like this. Like, Led Zeppelin themselves say that they're heavily influenced by, like, Leadbelly. If you've never heard Leadbelly, you're like, okay, I guess it's kind of like blues. If you also have those references, you're like, yeah, like that's what a bass guitar sounds like when you're pulling from, like, deep Southern type stuff. The Beatles saying that they were also influenced by that, you're like, the fuck you are. Like, it don't sound anything like it.
But they didn't say that, did they? No. You're making that up, right?
But that's what I'm saying, is that you can be influenced by, but not actually, like, impacted by kind of thing. So, like, the influences that these Golden Age or Silver Age fighters talk about, we don't have reference for And so it totally gets lost. Whereas if you like follow those tracks that are like this influenced that, the references that Bach was using, if you go back and listen to old hymns, you're like, oh no, I totally hear that.
You'd get it, but you also were never sitting in those fucking church as a kid, just being washed over by these hymns.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, you would be further along the historical context line, but also what Bach was doing was pulling from childhood. It'd be like Christmas carols or what, like things like Rudolph the Red-Nosed, like pulling from your first musical experiences as a human being were probably in a church.
Yeah.
So your ecclesiastical musical context was like what you were formed of. So he's making these incredibly complex compositions out of the building blocks of your childhood experience of music. I mean, that is just something so powerful. But now, and of course, Bach is like considered the genius, and he is not neglected by history. But there is this layer that is just gone, and so this is something that I think that we talked about, that we mentioned, which is that the Muay Thai, and we're calling this the Muay Thai of Rama 9, King Rama 9.
Which is the king before the current one.
We're now in the era of Rama 10. The era of King Rama 9 was this vast era of the modernization of Muay Thai. He like oversaw the rise of Lumpini Stadium, was a huge patron of not only Muay Thai but also boxing at Lumpini Stadium, and he basically fashioned the era of not only Golden Age but Silver Age and Bronze Age Muay Thai, and then all the way through past the Golden Age, which we kind of widely regarded as like the decline somewhat in modern Muay Thai. And there's this feeling like we're just no longer in the era of Rama 9. This is a completely different era. History marches on, but there is this feeling like we have left that era. And it's actually, I'm reminded of when King Rama 9 was still alive, I believe. Loma Lukbumi coming back from IFMA, having lost a fight. IFMA amateur, a world tournament. And she lost the fight and she didn't feel like she had lost it. And at the time, Thais were really, had a very hard time adjusting to international amateur rules. A lot of them are very counter to what they grew up with, the Muay Thai they knew. And she lost, and she said something that is one of the most impactful things for me of anything that Thai has said about Muay Thai, honestly. It was such a strange thing. And it was just very simple. She was like, that is not the king's Muay Thai. And you have to understand, the Thais and the king and Muay Thai is a social bond. The Muay Thai was for the king, of the king. The king supported it. I remember Diesel Noi talking about his when he lost to Wichanoi, and the prince was in attendance, not even the king. And Wichanoi, I think it was Wichanoi, not Kaopong. I think it was Wichanoi. Was it Kaopong?
I think it was Kaopong.
Kaopong
Diesel Noi got knocked out.
Rocked him, and he could not stand up.
He said, so it's the current king, but at the time he was the prince, and Diesel Noi was like, the prince was in attendance and I couldn't stand up.
Yeah.
It was this like, I could not stand, and the prince was there. Like, and it was the worst
but
thing
it wasn't just the fact that he was there was the most important thing in his mind. He's like, that's how hard I was wrung by Kaopong, who's a vicious puncher at the time, that I couldn't even stand for the prince. And that's the prince, not even the king.
Yeah, well, Padej Suk was given his trophy, his Prince's Cup, that he's named for by the prince. It was a huge thing. It's like it becomes your title.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, okay.
I'm just saying what a
the
huge
prince
deal
is important.
it is.
Yeah.
It's a big deal.
So, in a certain way, what we're doing is we're talking about the Moy of Rama 9, and you actually, I consider you blessed to having fought in the era of Rama 9.
Yeah.
You fought on actually his king's birthday after his death, with Diesel Noi and Karahat in the corner for the WMC title way up in weight. Like, that was a very powerful, memorable fight for me. even though you were overmatched by size. But that was a turning point fight, and it feels like there was a passing of era. So we don't want to just be like nostalgic people being like, Muay Thai isn't like how it used to be. But it's like, let's just sketch out, let's put a pause on all the like pad work porn and the knockout highlights and just like sketch out that there's actually more being lost than we even realize. Like there's fabrics of time being unwoven. I'm going to stop this and start this again. So moving along this idea of the ecclesiastical music of Bach, there was a time when the fighters of Konkan had a style. The fighters of Karat had a style. So when Karahat came out of Konkan as this incredible femur artisan, like he developed into one, he was in the line of Phupad Noi, who was a very femur fighter. And then after Karahat, Samrak, femur fighter, but like femur but deadly or something, I don't know. And it's like, when these Konkan fighters are fighting in the ring, like Bach, they're weaving in the context of their region. The Moy of Konkan. So when you're watching this, you're not just watching a fighter somewhere, you're watching a fighter from a region that has a history and a context. The Karat fighters were like powerful stand-in smashers, largely, right? Heavy-handed, Muay sometimes, but strong. So even when you're watching these fighters now, you don't even have the context of the family of Muay that they're springing from.
Yeah, now it's more like gym oriented, I think.
What? Like what gym?
Like
it's not even, baby.
No, when I think of like Phupad Noi, Samrak, Karahat, Diesel Noi was at the Hapalong gym, so there's actually quite a few amazing fighters from that gym. But like Karahat's the only superstar to come out of his gym. Phupad Noi is the only one with the war root.
But why is that gym oriented?
I'm saying that now you'd be like, oh, Jitmungnan, strong gym. Before you were like,
but there's no style though. That's the.
I'm not saying it's all one style. I'm saying now you're like, oh, the gym has strong fighters because they pull them.
Well, we have to explain that. Now mega gyms like Pet Yin D, PK Sanchai, Jitmunong, they basically gobble up the talent that's brewing in the provinces, like good young bucks that are beating everybody locally.
Yeah, so what I'm saying is no longer is the reference, where does Tawan Chai come from, Chonburi? Nobody thinks about that. Instead is what gym is he at now?
Okay.
That's the reference.
But let me continue. These boys are pulled into a mega gym and there is no style of the gym.
Right.
Like, because they have so many fighters. I think PK has 40, or did Jitmunong have 40? Have 40. There's so many fighters. And there could be stylistic elements that are like populating in, but Rotong is not like Pampayok.
No.
There are.
No.
So previously, gyms like in the Golden Age would also have a style. They might not be from the region, but like Hapalong was a great knee fighting gym. Jockey Gym was just like femur crazy.
All southpaw femur.
All like totally. The craziest femur fighters you ever heard of. Like Seyotong had a style. So not only was there a regional style from which fighters came and represented, but then there was also gym styles. Now you have really regional styles almost erased, and then they're put into big melting pot mega gyms that basically bought out all the contracts of the young fighters and just hog all the belts maybe, and they're very politically strong, so it's belt, 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 belt. But the point isn't just like Walmart has crushed all the mom and pop stores, which it has, but when you're watching these fights, we no longer have the ecclesiastical music of Bach. We can't even access the associations of Konkan that made Karahat even more delicious to watch. kind of, do you agree with that?
Yeah,
Like,
but I think actually, and this was not part of our conversation before, I just thought of it as you were saying that, but that fact is probably the most, when I hear the like gambling has ruined Muay Thai, I'm really not sympathetic to this argument.
to some
Saying
degree.
that gambling has ruined Muay Thai in that sense, where commercialism makes it so that you want a song that can play 90 times on the radio and it's got like hook, chorus, hook,
Yeah,
is totally what people consume now.
yeah.
Whereas before, when people like wanted to hear a 13-minute song, that's
Yeah.
who they were gamblers back in the day, but there were fans of Muay Thai that were like, I want to
Well-
see a fucking like narrative fight.
Yeah.
People don't want a 13-minute song anymore.
Yeah.
They're like, change the station, like hit next, like whatever the thing
Totally.
is.
Which is why entertainment Muay Thai now is very popular because it can be clicked through and clicked into,
Yeah.
and even more. So we're talking about stadium Muay Thai and the mega gyms. With entertainment Muay Thai, then you're even stripping out the gyms, and you're just really now have promotional Muay Thai.
Yeah.
Like, there's a style that the promotion is like putting on all fighters, and all fighters are bending themselves to that style. It happened in the past. Wong Song Chai had his style, but now there is a kind of like stripping away of nuance and history and heritage that is even more extreme to just pure product in a way. And I do think there's reasons for this, and I don't want to be like only down on the present or whatever, because history, like things become popular for a reason, history marches on. But I do want us to like capture out some of these details that are just being rubbed out. Like when Diesel Noi told us, we just filmed with him for the library, that he was from Konkan, I'm like, oh,
Had you forgotten that?
I never knew it. I never knew he was from there. I just knew that Karhat and Samrak, little like, I'm the most femur. No, I'm. I don't know. I just feel like, and there is that sadness. Like a 15-year-old now cannot hear Kashmir. You can hear it. You can fucking dial it up on Spotify, but you can't hear it anymore. You can't hear that driving volume of that main line. That was very interesting. Do you have more thoughts on that? Tool marks. We're
I
talking
don't
about
remember
tool
what
marks.
the tool marks was. Or the monolith.
Yeah, the one was gone. But I think that tooth marks were kind of like the tool marks, that you could see how a fighter was shaped. That regions and then gyms had, you could feel the craftsmanship in the creation of the fighter. In their fighting, it expressed more than just themselves. This idea about fighting that is this great. Combat sports are this great art form because it's just you in the ring and nobody else, and it's just you all by yourself. But that's not Thai.
No.
You're always connected to these tendrils of what made you and people that support you.
What were we listening to recently that started with a fucking like 2-minute long drum solo?
I don't remember that.
There are no instrumental solos anymore. Like, I grew up with Guns N' Roses. I love Guns N' Roses. There was always a Slash guitar solo.
Every rock song had one.
But
for
now
sure.
that doesn't exist. Like, if you talk to some
It does
15-year-old
it? I
now,
don't
they'd
even
be
know.
like,
I
what the
don't
fuck's a
listen to-
guitar solo?
I don't even know. Yeah.
Which, in
And the
like a
guitar-
Golden Age fight
and
where
the
you're like,
guard-
Carhat's going on is like zipping around.
Yeah, the
somewhere,
guitar
like-
solo in the Golden Age fight is the 4th round when the fighter just goes to another gear and just blows the fight out without even landing a strike, even like this beautiful escalation. This
Or Phnom Penh like taking Gong Torni's back for full 2 minutes with the
Yeah.
ref not breaking it. You're
Totally.
like, it's a drum solo right there.
Yeah, so I just don't want to be disheartened by these erasures, but you also want to take note of them. Like Daniel Dennett writing that in his book about Bach changed my life and my perspective, just noting that that there are things in this world you think you are listening to them and you're not even listening to them anymore. And I feel like these fighters, it's not the same thing, but it's like you watch a Karahat Wong Chunoi fight, the first 2 rounds edited out. Okay, their techniques are preserved in a way, but then you go visit them and you learn as a earnest fighter, you have them train you in person for an hour, and a lot of those materials that are not fighting, their personality, their body posture, all those things suddenly are recorded and reattached to their Muay. It's not just a biomechanical extraction of a technique, like, oh, I like how he does that, I'm gonna do that in my MMA fight.
Yeah.
Like, there is some sense like the historical fabric is reattached. It's not completely lost. Before we started making the library, it was lost. There was no access to it. I mean, we didn't know even where these people were. We didn't even know Diesel Noi was teaching or around in any way, like when we first started this thing. So I feel like okay, can we roll through this to this next topic kind of? No, it's the same topic, but it's the other half of it. So this is a very kind of like depressive kind of like wasteland concept that I've been talking about. Everything lost.
We've been in the minor key.
There's well, and Walter Benjamin for philosophy, sociology people, social critic, philosopher, German Jew, saw the rise of Nazism. He wrote about, he has this beautiful essay where he talks about the angel of history, and he's thinking about a painting by Paul Klee. I don't know how to pronounce the European name. But he imagined the angel of history, and this is how he summarized the angel of history. So everybody who cares about this stuff, he's like, the angel of history is bending down, facing the past. The future is behind him, and he's facing the past, and he's bending down to pick up the things that have fallen behind him, or it's actually in front of him, because he's backwards facing. And the winds of progress blow his wings open and blow him forward, which is backward.
And he pulls.
And he pulls, but he can't. There's this sense of desperation because you can't grab everything. It's like trying to grab everything in a burning building, house. You're like, do I get my baby pictures or do I get the trophy? Like, you know what I mean? And I think this image he has is that the angel of history is this like metaphysical being almost who's like trying to pick up the things that have fallen in the past, but his wings, the very nature of what he is blowing. He's catching the wind of progress. And so that's kind of where we're at in this melancholy way. But this connects to this other thing, which is that instead of talking about COVID as a virus or pandemic, I have spent a lot of time studying Spinoza and the half century of modernization in the early 1600s to like 1670 or so in the Dutch, among the Dutch and the British at the time in that edge of Europe. And it's like, what people don't realize about that time of modernity when like democracy was first starting to flourish, or corporations, corporate structures were starting to flourish. Slavery was becoming an economic engine. Like big things were happening. It was a time of plagues. Like there were so many plagues at that time that were just wrecking cities.
Right, which goes together when you have international commerce like that. That's how plagues work.
Well, exactly.
Like they feed on each other,
Plagues,
they go together.
So my idea is we're actually living in a time of plague. Like, yes, it's a virus, it's not a plague, but the plague. But the connectivity between everybody, yes, there's digital connectivity, but the physical connectivity between all of us is what spreads the plague. And the connectivity is what produces modern upheaval and change. And so while we're talking about this like erasure of history and the past as a sad thing, and the just terrible things that are happening because of COVID, there is a perspective in which we are living in the time of great modernization of some kind. That horrible things were happening in 1640. Plagues were just wrecking. You got a letter. Spinoza would get a letter from a philosopher, and he would iron it to remove the plague. And I just think, like, yes, we feel like we're losing so much, and there's so much terrible going on. But this is kind of the state when everything changes, and sometimes changes in just this incredible way. So how do you feel about that with Muay Thai? Like, because we get locked in on this, like.
Well, this is the thing, is when there's like massive change that kind of, it's like you throw the grenade and have to jump. Like, these are the kinds of changes that come about with like catastrophic plague or cities burning or like whatever the thing is that causes like kind of rapid development, even if it causes being kicked backwards first, is that I hate to use such a trendy term, but like the new normal that comes after that remains the new normal for so long that you don't know where those changes came from. So we're on the cusp of something.
Yeah.
We were fighting in the time of Rama 9.
Yeah.
But now we're in Rama 10. We're experiencing both.
Yeah.
I'm of a generation that's like, I was so young pre-internet that I don't really remember it, but when internet was starting to kick in, I like have memories of this, so I'm a little bit between those two.
Yeah.
The internet changed the world so dramatically.
Yeah.
Like, there are these things that just pop and they're huge, so I don't know what the like huge positive thing that will come out of the changes in Muay Thai is, but it's there. Like,
well,
there has to be.
I mean,
Women are doing
COVID
really
had
well.
to, yeah, COVID had to fucking break the structures of Muay, coupled with the problems of very powerful gambling interests, and now women are supposedly set to fight at Lumpini, which was unimaginable 5 years ago.
Yep.
In the realm of Rama 9. So in Rama 10, women actually might, it remains to be seen. Progress can always lead to backlash. So it doesn't always go like that. But there have been some very big changes that have come about because of this disruption.
Yeah.
And we don't have the foresight to see all the way to where it's going to transform. I'm just like, let's just not lose all the knowledge of the Moy of Rama 9.
So it's not Dark Age it?
Yeah, it's not Dark Age it. Right, exactly. And so, I don't know, to me, I actually think you're very privileged, and everyone is, who lived through the age of Rama 9, like fought as fighters in the age of Rama 9, and it's crossing over. I always thought like people who lived like 1905, 1910, when industrialization was starting, they were moving from like an era to another era that was just going to be so radically different. But it's almost like to have the life where you've touched and you in your lifespan can reach across this boundary. I remember I just saw this today on the internet that 66 years elapsed between the Wright brothers and landing on the moon. 66 years isn't even a human life.
Yeah. That's some rapid change.
That's some rapid change.
Yeah.
And so we can't say that for Muay Thai or the Muay Thai of Thailand that this is doomsday or something. But I'm always like very passionate about an ecological sense of not losing all the old growth forest.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, some cool things could be done if we just like steamroll all the old growth forest and just put a fucking giant parking lot all over Thailand. But that feels like it's a waste. I don't know.
Well, it's not only what you pull, like what you save out of the fire, but in the example of the angel can pull more if it's connected to other things. Like pulling individual items, they lose their reference. Like they're
Yeah,
not
that's
connected to
true.
things. So pulling things that are connected to other things, pulling the references with them is important. I keep thinking about how like Joe Hong Tong was talking about how back when he was a kid with his twin brother, you would have to like wake up to watch Muay Thai. His dad would like come wake him up and be like, come watch this fight. Like there were no, oh, I'll click on this YouTube link and watch this. It wasn't on TV all the time. Like you had to witness it live and then maybe there would be highlights.
Yeah.
What's amazing about that reference for learning Muay Thai when you cannot see it all the time is you actually are stealing auras. You're like, you be Chumuk Pet.
Well,
I'm
we'll
gonna
explain what they would literally.
It would be the same thing as how if you picture any little kid who's like, you're Spider-Man, I'm Thor, let's go. You have to act like Spider-Man, I have to act like Thor, we're gonna go do our thing. So these kids would watch a fight between like Chumuk Pet and Diesel Noi, and then each would be that person and reenact it playing together, sparring the next morning. Who knows how accurate they were at any of that, but they're pulling an aura rather than like, I pulled out this individual move that I'm gonna perfect.
Yeah.
And this is how Wang Chinoi teaches this one jumping kick, so that's how I do it. Instead, they're impersonating Wang Chinoi. And I feel like that way of learning versus our like super saturated, look up the YouTube video, imitate it kind of thing is, it's like
Break
how
it down.
back in Shakespeare's day, English is the only language that uses audience, which is audio rather than a spectator, because you were listening, you were like memorizing Shakespeare plays. Like you could hear the entire thing, whereas now we're like, I remember that one funny line from that one Seth Rogen movie. Like it's not the same thing.
Yeah.
The brain works differently.
Totally.
So while I think it's a super positive thing that with the internet the way that it is now, we can like super spread the seeds of Sanctia Noi, of there's no more Sanctia Noi.
Yeah.
There will no longer be any new videos, but you can like super spread what there is. I think that's beautiful, but there is something lost to the Joe and Jen, like
for
let's
sure.
imitate these superheroes.
I want to say this is the way to watch the Muay Thai Library because it's like no other material on the internet or has been created on any platform, in any medium. It's like, don't just technique steal. Feel the aura of the man, as much of the fabric as you can, because that's the precious stuff. I'm gonna, I don't know, there's this, I did a very long form breakdown of one of my favorite fights of Sylvie, which I put on YouTube. I'll probably put it on Patreon also with like an article or something. But she fights a 60-kilo girl who's just unbelievably big, 30-pound difference. A skilled fighter too.
From a gym that I've fought against many times, so they know me.
Yeah, you weren't surprising them. They fucking knew everything you're about.
What does this one do?
Yeah, exactly. And Sylvie fought this girl, and it was just this great fight for me. And I break down for an hour. I go frame by frame. I literally scroll through frame by frame with some visual notes and things. But for me, there's elements of this fight that are like Diesel Noi. Even though Sylvie's tiny, Diesel Noi is tall. And it's not even a technical thing. It's like there's a dimension of the fighting that you fought in that fight is something that Diesel Noi always talks about, which is this crowding, early round crowding. Make your opponent throw their strikes. It doesn't matter if they score. Try to block them or whatever, but you are crowding them. And then you, as a tiny fighter against this giant fighter, are doing Diesel Noi. He did it as a tall fighter who could kind of like spider arm people, but the same aura like had crossed over eras in a beautiful way. And I'm like, that's how to watch these Muay Thai Library sessions, is look for the aura, because all these fighters have very specific auras, and we ourselves, because of our generation and because we're not Thais, we don't even know most of the fabric that's being referenced there. So I'm like, not only what you're saying, but I'm saying there's something also for one to do now.
Yeah.
I think that's good, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Rolling.
Do you want to take the lead on this one?
I hate taking the lead on anything, but
That is not true. But if you want me to take the lead, I can.
you take the lead so that I know how to form it.
Okay. Sylvie posted a video where it was actually this beautiful video, to give you a little bit of an idea where, like, we thought to ourselves, it'd be really nice to just make a video encouraging people out there. Like, not everybody, but like, think about a group of people that need encouragement. And I was like, well, Sylvie, who do you think you'd want to encourage? And she was like, trans fighters. And I was actually very surprised. I thought you were going to say something else.
Not because I don't support trans fighters, but he was shocked that would be the first.
It was the first one that came. Like, it's not something we talk a lot about. But it was this beautiful video of just encouragement and support for trans fighters from the basis of being, as a female fighter, someone who, there is no place really in the sport. Like, there are places for female fighters, but there is this feeling like you still have no place at the table.
Yeah.
And that's how Sylvie approached this. It's like, you feel like there's no place for you. I have felt there's no place for me. Keep going. Encouragement. And there was, whatever, as you'd expect, some kind of internet pushback on this whole thing and people taking their positions. But this leads to something that actually I want to talk about, which is not that argument, but rather to talk to you about this actually amazing thing that has happened in your time in Thailand, is that you've actually had a lot of contact with the gender divide in the country.
Mm-hmm.
And so I kind of wanted to, like, talk about that and let people know, because not everybody knows, and then also maybe get your view on that.
That was vague. What do you mean?
Well, once we start, I'll make it not vague.
Oh, okay.
Because right now we're in a vague area. But, like, you want more lead in? I can give you more.
Yeah.
Okay. The most famous trans fighter in Thailand is Nontomb, of whom the movie Beautiful Boxer was made. Mm. And she's still a star in Thai culture. But she came out of Lana Muay Thai, which was your first gym in Thailand. Mm-hmm. And all the people that trained you were part of her time.
Yeah.
Like, there was no real Lana Muay Thai doesn't really exist anymore. There is a Lana Muay Thai. It was bought.
In Nongtomb's name, you'll see it's Kiat Busaba, which is the Thai name of Lana Muay Thai.
So Kiat Busaba doesn't exist anymore. Yeah. But we didn't realize when we went to Lana that was, I didn't realize
No, we had even seen the movie, and we had, like, no idea that it was the same.
Okay. I feel like I'm actually, like, fighting you on this.
No, don't fight with me. I just don't know where you want me to start. Talking about Nontomb.
Right there. Like, well, did it mean anything to you when you discovered this? Nontomb was in your corner when you fought your first big fight.
Well, I'll start there, because that was the first, like, kind of contact. Like, Nontomb is a huge inspiration. She's kind of this. It's not even that she's a superstar. It's that she's got this kind of, like, incredible life story. And for people who have never heard of Nontomb, she was fighting as a man at Lumpini, and then ultimately paid for her sex change operation through fighting. Is like how they frame it.
Well, she was fighting as a man, but she was not identifying as a man.
Right. She's a trans fighter.
Trans fighter.
So she ultimately was able to transition through the process of fame and earning fight money.
And she was famous because she was fighting. When you say as a man, it kind of obscures the fact that she was known as a trans man,
Well, this
fighter,
is complicated,
right?
too, because in Thailand, outside of Thailand, people talk about how tolerant Thailand is of, they call them katoi here, which is not entirely a polite word, but so, like, male to female trans is considered very tolerated in Thailand. There's a huge population. They're very much part of like everyday fabric of Thailand. I agree there's a lot of tolerance, but there's levels of intolerance that are incredibly harsh still.
In Thailand.
And part of what Nontomb was experiencing is that if you're talking about like an ID card or something that's like your actual national identity, you cannot change your sex in Thailand. So Nontomb being able to fight at Lumpini, being able to fight men, all of this is because according to Thai law and Thai perception, she is a man, like will forever be a man, despite surgeries, despite anything. So her, I don't want to call it a gimmick because what she was doing was very real, but her kind of like fame point was wearing lipstick and makeup, but fighting men.
Well, she was expressing her trans identity, but still fighting as a man in the ring.
Yes.
But what made her separate from any other man was that she was very visibly a trans fighter.
Yeah,
Right.
and ultimately transitioned.
And she became very famous for it.
Yeah.
And there's a beautiful movie, Beautiful Boxer, about
Yeah.
it. But what part of this is that you were actually connected to Lana. You didn't realize that she actually was from the same gym
yeah,
where
that,
you had trained. Remember,
that
she came
Palm,
and
like,
visited,
raised
and
her.
and
Yes.
she wanted to like go see this chicken.
I was fighting on like this Warriors or something in Chiang Mai, and she was also on the card. So Nontomb, Sanchai, and I were all on a card, and I was just like freaking out. And because Nontomb was from Gyatbusaba or Lana, where I was fighting, she knew Den, who was my corner man. She came and helped in my corner. And I was more starstruck by Nontomb than I was freaked out by my opponent, and I got my ass kicked in that fight. But she was very, very sweet, and just this amazing energy. Like, she has that star power energy about her.
I remember you in the pre-fight room when she was there, and it felt like you felt touched by her presence.
Totally.
Well,
Totally.
That's why I'm talking to you, so we can bring that out.
In the
What does
same
that
way
mean?
that
What does
someone
mean?
would be like, oh my God, Sanchai's in my corner. I was like, oh my God.
So the fact that it was
Nontomb
a
is in my
trans
corner.
fighter didn't mean anything. It was just a celebrity.
I actually think of her as a woman.
Okay.
I think for trans people, thinking of her as trans is very important.
Okay.
And I understand that identity as well, but I think of her as a woman. So her being in my corner was like this female fighter, this like woman fighter who's gone through a lot is in my corner, which representation makes sense. I'm identifying with the parts of her that match with my experiences, which her experiences as a woman. But with her, I'm not like a super fan of hers because of how she fights or who she fought or any of these things like this. It's like who she is and the battles that she had kind of surrounding her identity to become who she is and what she ultimately wanted to be.
Right.
Whereas, you know, Golden Age fighters, I look at how they fight and
Totally.
this kind of thing, which is different. But leading from Nontomb, I again was in a gym, although I was at the gym first.
Well, I actually want to go. Don't want to jump to that one.
You want to go to Petchija?
Yeah, because that was the next one. So that was the first kind of like coincidence of the gender edge in Thailand.
Yeah.
And it was pure coincidence, but it was this kind of like happenstance of connection. The next one, also total happenstance, where you had Petchija was your hero at the time. You
Yeah.
literally were.
We used to watch Petchija live on TV. Like, we were legit watching Petchija on TV at the time that she was fighting. It was like contemporary, whereas now all of this is in the past.
So Petchija, at the time when she was your hero, what was?
She was like
So
11. She was
so
probably,
maybe people don't know what we're talking about.
Petchija was like 11 years old, and she would fight boys on TV on Aswindam, which doesn't exist anymore. But it was this huge thing. This little girl fighting little boys and beating them. But her capacity as a fighter, she was just so good. Like, we would see her change between fights. Like, we could actually see progress that she'd made between fights. And her level was so above mine. This was not a like, oh, wow, she's really shaping up. This was like, she's so much better than me.
Well, she seemed
Like-
actually not better than you, but better than any female fighter we'd ever seen.
For sure.
At 11.
For sure.
Like, it was surreal.
Yes.
Like, her timing, her eyes, like, not just pretty technique. A lot of fighters have pretty technique, but her timing and her eyes and her control over the fight
she was
space.
strong.
It was very, like, and clinch fighter, like,
Yeah.
her skills were pronounced.
Yeah. And
should we change
and
this, by the way?
That's fine.
This angle?
And when you would mention her, like at the gym or something, all the Thai men, all the Thai trainers would be like, same a boy, same as a boy, same as a boy, which they don't say about anybody.
That was that was like their first response.
Yes.
But for those that don't know, you're talking to Pinu about Petchy Jaw, and what does he say?
So this was, initially I was talking about Petchy Jaw up at Lana because that's where we were, but she was fighting for the time when I transitioned. So we came down to Petrungrung in Pattaya and we moved. It wasn't when we had moved yet, we were just visiting. But
Our first visit.
we're talking about Petchy Jaw and Kurnu's just like, oh no, she used to live at my gym. She lives right back there, like currently lives
Like
across this
Through
chicken
this
farm.
door, there's a chicken farm where Chicken Man lived.
We're like, what? Like, what? And I was entirely too shy to do anything about that. I was just super excited by the
Didn't
idea.
he call her over?
He called her, and she came and took a photo with me. And I was totally starstruck by this. She was probably like 12 years old at the time.
It was just this incredible, crazy moment.
And then we had to build up the courage to actually cross the chicken farm and like go to their gym and watch the training with her and her brother Mawin.
We took a camera. I think there's video from that first visit.
We interviewed her mom. I
Interviewed
think.
them. Maybe I can link that in the reading
But
notes.
so then I ended up training with Petchy Jaw. When we moved from Chiang Mai down to Pattaya, and Petrungrung became my gym, and I was also training with Petchy Jaw and her brother, like the two gyms. She had already been banned from fighting boys on TV at that point. So that stopped before I got to her.
Well, first of all, you trained with her every single day
Yep.
for maybe more than a year.
Yeah, it was more than a year.
More than a year. So every day Sylvie would go, morning, full training, Petrungrung. Afternoon, full training, Petrungrung. Then Jija would come home from school at her family gym, and Sylvie would go train full training at Omikun gym. So you were three, but you were doing pretty much all the training she was doing, you were doing, plus 2 other sessions.
Yeah, yeah.
All they would do is run in the morning, so
Yeah.
they wouldn't even do training in the morning. So, but you were actually undergoing there as a Western female fighter. You spent a year training with Petchy Jaw full time. It's just this incredible coincidence of history that is just mind-blowing.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know that there's ever been a Western female fighter that trained full-time with a Thai female fighter for a year. Ever.
I don't think so.
I can't picture one. Maybe
Yeah.
there's one out there, but, and this gym is just her and her brother.
Was,
And
yeah.
Padman,
Yeah.
a couple, her
A
dad
couple
and
of
another
babies.
Padman. Yeah, a couple little rugrats.
Yeah.
But it wasn't like there was a gym of 20 people and, oh yeah, she was there on the bag somewhere or something. It was her training, her dad trying to like build her into a star, and the whole family was freaked out that they had gotten to this amazing point where Ashwandam and Mr. Pinson Chai was like a sponsor and giving them money. He had built them this ring, and she was on national television, and she fucking got stopped because she developed breasts, and suddenly it was not becoming, what was the, they like had an announcement
They said
on
it was
television.
no longer appropriate.
No longer appropriate. She was beating boys, and she was becoming this star, and suddenly no longer allowed.
Oh.
And you were right there during this time of upheaval in the family where they're like trying to make her better and better, but there's no one for her to fight. She's like 13 years old, 14 years old, right?
Yeah, and they just kind of like, they just kind of cut that plant. Like
What does that mean? I don't know what you're talking about.
When Petchy Jaw got banned from fighting boys anymore, It was so abrupt. She and her opponent were in the ring and had done their Ram Moy, and then Mr. Pinsenchai he's the man who puts on this promotion, got in the middle of the ring with his microphone
Powerful
and said, this will
promoter.
not be happening because it's no longer appropriate for girls to be fighting boys on TV. Technically, this is not allowed in Thailand by the Sport Authority, but it is so permitted anywhere outside. So she was doing it on TV that it got like cracked down. And the fact that they were in the ring, did their Ram Moy, and then it got shut down means that either Mr. Pinsenchai was flexing a little bit, letting it go that far, or they like called it in and were like, if this goes on, there are serious consequences. I don't know. But it was like,
it was dramatic
on TV. It was a big deal.
And I had that feeling like Song Weon, her father, was like, holy fuck.
Yeah.
So anyways, not only did you get to train with her this entire time and just like undergo her training, clinch with her, work opposite her, it was just a few people in the gym, but then we also were living through with them while they were living through this transition of frustration, and she fought another boy in a show fight that you filmed.
They called it an exhibition fight to make it
on a
allowed.
military base that you filmed. You went with them. We would travel with them to fights. She would fight, you would fight, and it was just, it's just, we don't talk about this very much, but if that was the only thing you did in Thailand and nothing else,
It'd be
that
amazing.
is just a historic touch point for female Western Thai co-experiences.
I remember early when we had moved to Pattaya and I had been training with them, but it was like within the first couple months. And I wanted to take Petchija and Mawin to a movie. I wanted them to like go see a movie in a theater because their family doesn't have money. They don't do stuff like this. I just thought it'd be like a nice treat. So their dad was like, they have to finish training. So they finished training, and then the two of them and their cousin, IQ, so cute,
little boy.
their dad drove us all to the movie theater, and we were totally late, and it was like chaotic. But I remember on the drive there, Sangweon, her father, was like shaking his head in disapproval and saying that Petchija was a Tom.
Already.
Yeah, so this at the time I didn't understand because my own understanding of identities and concepts was just limited, and that's just on me. Petchija didn't look like a Tom at the time. A Tom is basically like a butch.
But she's like 13 years old.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But she just looked like a normal 13-year-old girl. She had the school haircut. She dressed the way a kid doing Muay Thai does. She occasionally would try on her brother's school clothes for photos and would be like, I don't want to be a boy, I'm just trying it.
Right.
But when he said this, I was like, she's not a Tom. Like, I've seen what Toms look like. She
Well,
doesn't...
please explain what a Tom is. Like, Bush does not answer
So
the question.
Tom is short for tomboy, but it's basically like a butch girl who often will have a girlfriend who is called a D, who has the more feminine identity.
We're talking about a lesbian. I want to express it.
Yes.
Yeah.
But it is a look. It is a like dawning masculine.
But it's not just fashion.
No.
It's a sexual orientation.
It is a sexual orientation.
Yeah. I mean, for some people,
Yes.
Don't understand.
In these relationships where there's a Tom, which is the masculine one, and a D, which is the feminine one, very often the D will go on to heterosexual relationships later. Toms don't
Less
necessarily, unless it's
so.
like marrying for
I don't know,
life
maybe less
convenience
so,
or whatever.
Yeah.
But I was very shocked when he said this, because I'm like, she doesn't look like, dress like, act like any of these things, and this was my only reference for this identity. Now, Petchija at 18, 19 years old, totally a Tom, like 100%.
Yeah.
Like, that was just, she had not reached the freedom for this identity yet.
Well-
So she is still within this, like, gendered...
Well, this boundary
Milieu.
between heteronormative culture, and we also should fill this out. I'd like you to fill this out because maybe people don't realize there's a lot of Tom female fighters among Thai female fighters. Like, it is a, I don't think it's a dominant orientation and presentation in Thai female fight, but there are a lot, and you have fought a lot of Toms.
Yes.
This isn't a yes or no question. This is opening up descriptions.
You didn't ask a question.
Yeah,
You
it's not a
stated-
question. Oh, I'm like saying, no, take it away, baby.
Yeah, no, this is a very common...
People don't know. They never fought in Thailand.
It is not common to have Katoi, or the like male to female fighters, outside of kind of like show fight type stuff. Up in Chiang Mai, there were actually a few.
Yeah, and there's one at Rambaz now.
That was cool.
Yeah.
But in terms of like frequency of Tom fighters, which is the masculine female version, tons. Katoi fighters, no, that's still like super unusual.
What would you say, like 20%?
Oh,
It's
I
very
don't know.
high.
I would never make I'm not good at math. I don't know what the thing would
All
be.
right. How many out of 10 fighters?
I don't want to do the 1 in 12 bullshit that we make fun of all the time. I don't know.
Okay, but you have information that other people have no information, so maybe.
If you have like a mostly female or largely female gym like Liang Persert or Petong Pong, I would say
A couple.
close to half
Oh.
of Petong Pong, and then like 5 out of Liang Persert, where there are like 13 girls or something. Like, it's quite a lot.
Wow. And
But that's the dynamic of a lot of girls together, rather than like this gym has one, that gym has one. You don't get a lot of toms that way, I don't think, but I'm not sure.
totally. But I'm kind of drawing out that not only were you training with Pechi Ja, but you also had been fighting toms
Yes.
as an experience
Yes.
for a very long time. And toms tend to fight differently.
Yeah.
With a different aura and persona.
More
A lot of
aggressively,
like Tanan Chinook is a very famous one.
Yeah. Dok My Ba.
They are
Elbows.
They are like embodying the masculinity of Thai Muay Thai as part of their identity,
Yeah.
their orientation, and they might even be drawn to Muay Thai, the hyper masculinity of Muay Thai, because it's so masculine, like because it's a masculine portrayal. And it's maybe something to point out that not only were you training with her, but you also, if you fight a lot in Thailand as a female fighter, you're fighting toms.
Yes.
And you might not be aware.
What do you mean you're not aware?
A hypothetical Western female fighter might not be aware that you're fighting a tom.
Well, toms look like toms.
Yeah, but to you, they just have a short-haired girl.
Oh, I see what you mean.
Like, you don't
Yeah.
realize there's a pattern, there's a sociological group within Thailand.
Yeah.
Like, Thailand female Muay Thai is heavily shaded to a tom identity. Like, there is a strong dimension of it, a strong representation, I would say. So, this is just this incredible like nexus that happened with you training with Pechi Ja, who was actually trying to break the gender barrier,
Yeah.
and then was cut off from it. And then you also had that much smaller experience with Nontomb before that. And then, how much time we have here?
5 minutes?
We left Omi Kun. You modified your training again. Pechi Ja fought a few female fighters, destroyed them. We did see her lose once.
Yeah, but that
Right.
girl was big.
Really big. She
To a
started
tom,
having
actually,
she started
as
had
it
to
were.
fight started having to fight much bigger.
Yeah.
She went to Japan and fought up and lost, and nobody said anything.
Mm.
She lost the path forward from this peak as a 13-year-old. And she's actually part of the reason why I feel like the biggest difference between the genders is sociological in fighting. Like, she was at this incredible moment, and then everything got cut. Her development got cut.
She was raised and treated like a boy. Like when she was at Petrang Rung, living in this little like corner room with her family, and Krunu never took credit for her. He's like, oh no, she just
I
clinched
don't
and
think he
worked with
did
my
any.
boys.
Yeah, he just
But
part
she
of the
was
gym.
thrown in with the little boys because at that age, it's a little genderless. Like it can be a little bit more like
Yeah.
integrated. And so because she was allowed to be treated like a boy, because that's how you'll be treated in a gym that's a male space, she totally benefited from that.
And not only that, she had a brother,
And she's very talented.
but she had a brother that she then trained against. Once she left the like
Yeah.
little pen of,
Yeah.
she trained against her brother. Boom, boom, boom,
Yeah.
boom, and continued to be trained as a boy,
Yeah.
like the equal of her brother. Is her brother older or younger?
Older.
Older. So she had an older brother who was actually quite physically small.
And close. Yeah.
So
very close.
there wasn't like this big lopsided thing. So she could steel sharpened steel, and he was actually very late in developing, and he became a stadium fighter.
She's better than him, honestly. So she, in her.
Well, she was better than him. I don't know.
I haven't seen him fight in a long time, but in the balance of that, having her brother with her, it's not this like, oh, he'll pull her up. You also, as a fighter, having someone who you can dominate, who you can do things with. It was this perfect little pairing.
Oh, it was perfect.
Because he was bigger, she was a little bit better. Like they had
was,
this like nose and nose thing.
Yeah, and they had a little competitive. There was a competitive nature between the two of them. They had each had their strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah.
But we were right there. This is not a hypothetical thing. We were right there in the gym, experiencing this female fighter like phenom coming up and training against her brother, cut off from opportunities to develop. She had no like five female fighters she should fight. Right, that she had to get better than or something. There was nothing in front of her, and we were watching her develop like at this age of 13. I don't know if we got all the way to 14 with her or not. Close, but it was just like, we're not talking about something we heard about on the internet. We were there for a year. Every day. We saw something very unique and special that doesn't happen.
And to catch people up, because people don't know what happened to Petchija, she actually went onto the Thai boxing team, the national boxing team.
Because she had no Muay Thai opportunities.
For a couple of years and did pretty well. They were traveling around. She would get silver and gold.
I don't think she got gold.
She never got gold?
But she medaled in international boxing competition representing Thailand.
Right. And then now that she's like, I think she's about to turn 19, she is fighting for Thai Fight. So she's fighting women who are nowhere near the experience that she is, but she's doing really well. Like she looks amazing.
I think she's the best female fighter in the world.
Yeah, you can see how she's developed, but you can also see how she's lost.
Yeah, some aspects of her Muay have de-evolved from the lack of development, and then other things have evolved through her exposure to boxing. She was not good with her hands when she was young.
She never elbowed, and now she's amazing at elbows.
She's an elbow fighter, but she doesn't really clinch the way she used to clinch. She was just a surreal clinch fighter. The big fight that never happened was the showdown between her and Loma. Probably with both sides saying the other sides backed out of it. But that was the big fight back when she was young, like 14 years old, and Loma was like 16 or something, I'm guessing. But anyways, this is to say you were right at this nexus of gender.
Yes.
Right? Okay, so I'm going to pause this and we're going to go to the next one. Okay. You put your hat up a little bit so your eyes can
So then there's a part 3.
Which is almost the most extraordinary one of this, like, the way that your path has, like, walked along the gender boundary in Thailand. And this is a very special one. This is the most personal one.
Yeah.
I mean, Petchija was your hero before you met her.
Yeah.
But Angie was this other story.
So I was at Petchungrung for a while, and then Angie showed up just kind of like for fitness, sort of. She came with a friend her first couple of times.
29 or something?
I think she was already 30. But Angie has transitioned. Angie has had top surgery. She's been taking hormones for more than 10 years by the time I've met her. Yeah. Right. And she was just sort of getting into Muay Thai. Like, she was just kind of doing it for, I think she said, self-defense and
didn't she have some kind of anti-trans fear?
Yeah,
She said
she was worried about being by herself, things like this.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's an important part of the story, right?
But what's incredible to me about Angie's trajectory herself is incredible by itself. The connection to me is really remarkable, because when she saw me at the gym, I inspired her to be like, I want to do that for real. Like,
why was that? Because you were female or you were small?
I think it was my arms. I think that I was like really muscular.
Oh yeah?
And she was like, I want that.
This is incredible. A trans, male to female, transitioned woman comes to Petchungrung, for fitness and some sense of self-defense, strengthening herself, and she sees you and your arms and probably how hard you work.
So Angie started coming by herself. Like, she didn't need a friend anymore, and she started getting more and more serious about it, and she wanted to fight, and so they gave her some fights locally.
But you make it sound like it happened suddenly. She had to put in so much work.
She fought at Lumpini within the first 2 years of ever having stepped in a gym. That's incredible.
Totally, but those were 2 years.
Yeah.
I don't know, you gloss over this part, like, oh, and then she's in Lumpini. It's like, like I'm saying, you spent a year with Pechi Jha, training with her every single day. Not, I knew Pechi Jha, oh, she was on television. There was this experience. This experience from her, like, coming into the gym and being inspired by you to actually being in the gym where she is transformed. She is not physically just transformed into a fighter. Her identity has changed.
Yeah.
Like,
And Krunu admitted many times to me that he doesn't have anything against Katoy, but he was like, I never liked when Katoy would come to my gym because they don't take it seriously.
Well, he kind of held a traditional Thai bias against trans, I have a feeling.
Yeah.
It's like an everyday Thai
but
middle class.
His becoming open to her and taking her seriously, I believe, had a lot to do with the work I put in of having a small woman, cis woman, putting in all that work, Angie looking to me, Angie following me. I think that openness to Angie is not entirely due to me, but was definitely influenced by
because you changed his mind about yourself too. When we came to Petram Rung, one of the first things we said to him was, Sylvie wants to fight a lot. Like, you have no idea how much Sylvie wants to fight.
And I'd been fighting a lot. It was
in Chiang Mai.
There was proof of this already.
Yeah, but he is like, whatever. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
He was not into this idea, and he's like, sure.
Well,
I've heard.
He didn't have
a
lot of experience with. He had Pechi Jha, but she was not part of his gym. Like, he did not have experience with like a Farang female who was taking it very seriously.
That was beyond. You were beyond the chart. There's been no female fighter like you in history.
Yeah.
Male or female Farang, or female Thai or Western. Like, Jija wasn't fighting like you, and I'm like, you blew the like cap off of expectation. You trained so hard and so rigorously for years.
Yeah.
Without relent. Like, he would just call you the machine.
Terminator.
The Terminator. That this is the thing for me. Is like, you were doing this thing and you have this feeling like you're alone in the gym and you're doing all this work, and you're not being appreciated or accepted in the same way. Like, there's still a line between yourself and the Thai boys. And this devotion to your work was at this time of Angie having this quiet cross inspirational effect on someone else, who then took it upon herself to just defy every possibility.
Yeah.
Like, every possibility.
When she started fighting, like, even just local fights, but when she started fighting and started getting into the like fight training, and it was important to her to get faster at running and things like this, Angie and I aren't the same size, like, not even remotely.
Well,
she
like
fought at like 64 or something, and she's like 5'10", she's pretty tall. We couldn't like work together, but just having another woman in the gym who was working, who was serious, it was like, we are not directly doing anything with each other, but we can look at each other and be like, all right, here we go.
And the fucking like, the work is the currency of authenticity.
Yeah.
Which doesn't feel like it's then rewarded. Like, you cash in your work dollars and you're still second tier, second class. So when Sylvie did this video about like encouragement for trans fighters not having a place at the table, she's actually speaking of even though I didn't think of it when I watched your video, you're speaking of 2 years in the gym with a trans fighter. You independently are doing your own work. You're not fucking like, let's hold pads for each other. You are both isolated on a railroad track, all alone. And you were not inspiring each other.
No,
like,
but what was
consciously.
crazy about the pair of us, and I think I wrote about this on 8 Limbs a few times, but ultimately Angie ended up being the first visibly trans fighter at Lumpini. It happened at the same time that Nong Rose started fighting at Rajadamnern, and so they actually, for Nong Rose, changed the dress code, which made it possible for Angie to fight at Lumpini. You didn't used to be able to wear any kind of top. And they changed that for Nong Rose, and so they changed it for Angie, and she was able to fight, and I was just so unbelievably proud of her. But the things that we experienced, me as a cis woman and her as a trans woman, totally had these like shape-shifting, I wanted things that she had, and she wanted things that I had.
Well,
and I was like, these things that you want suck. And she's like, these things that you want suck.
To talk about this a little bit. Here, let me adjust this a little bit. Okay.
So, like I was saying at the beginning, how in Thailand, politically, culturally, and legally, as a trans woman, you are still a man. That gave Angie access to things that I do not have because I am all of those things a woman. I am legally, morally, culturally, all of these things a woman. I'm a cis woman, so that's okay for me. But there are things that I want people to look past the fact that women don't do these things or don't have access to these things, and on merit be like, yes, Sylvie can do that. That doesn't happen because at the end of the day, you still get stamped as a woman at the end of the day. Angie was given access to those things because at the end of the day, she's stamped as a man at the end of the day.
What are these things? We're still being very vague. Like,
I had been putting in work and training super hard and superseding the boys and coming to training with cuts on my face and all of this stuff for years. I'd been showing that I could do these things, and I still had to ask for clinching, sparring. Angie would be given clinching and sparring for a bar fight, because she's actually a man, and they would treat her like a boy. And I'm like, just treat me like a boy. And they wouldn't do it.
And we should clarify, the gym was really embracing of you.
Yes,
this wasn't like women, blah, 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 blah. They're openly very embracing of you for years, and supportive, and Bamrung, especially the father, the patriarch of the gym, was very supportive of you. You felt supported, but there were also structural differences that were not expressing an opinion about you, right?
It's the same thing, and I do not want to get into this argument, but it's the same thing when people want to politicize trans bodies, and that it all just comes down to this biological thing that is unchangeable. And so you treat that person that way because it's unchangeable, or they're not allowed these things because it's unchangeable. It's like that, but in Thai context, whereas we talk about it in Western context. When Angie actually fought at Lumpini, she was actually, I hate using actually so much, she was literally sexually transgressed by a doctor, by a fight doctor. Very inappropriate, but not like traumatizing, but completely inappropriate. And she, because
trans women are very sexualized in Thai culture. Well, you're mumbling it. I want people to know.
And not respected. The body is seen as this like, I can do these, whatever. This doctor like touched her inappropriately. She told me about it, and I told her she should tell Krunu, and she was like, I don't want to make a big thing about it. But she was complaining to me. She said, they should treat me like a woman. And I was like, if they treated you like a woman, you wouldn't be fighting at Lumpini. Like,
did you say that, or you thought that?
I thought that. No, I said that. Outright. I was like, if they treated you like a woman, you would not even be allowed in the doctor's room. Like, this would not happen. Obviously, they should not be doing what they were doing to her at all.
Right?
No. But it was this thing that was like, it's unfair to both sides. Like, everyone's wrong, rather than like, there should be a compromise.
Both of you didn't have a place at the table in the way that you wanted.
Yeah, and when I made this video, what I was saying is that I have a lot of compassion for trans athletes, and I believe they deserve a lot of compassion from people who don't politically agree with whatever present situation exists. But even though Angie had that opportunity, there's not a place for her. Like, she had this opportunity to fight at Lumpini at a time when it was kind of like a hot ticket. There's no place for Angie.
Well,
and
the
like,
door was opened with Rose.
Yes, but Rose is not fighting right now.
Yeah,
Angie's not fighting right now. Angie retired. But like, now they're setting the table for women are going to be able to fight at Lumpini. And so it's like, there was no place. Is that a place? I don't know. Like, we don't know whether that's really a place or not.
Yeah.
It remains to be seen.
So, I just wanted to pull out the story that your entire time here has actually been characterized by some of the biggest gender edge fighter stories of Thailand. Just out of happenstance. Like, Angie could have walked into any other Muay Thai gym and that would not have happened. You would have not have been there. Pinu would not have been there. Like, Pinu appreciates work. Like, there is, even as much as you cannot earn on merit a place as one of the boys, you do get a lot from merit. You do get a lot of merit. Like, from work, there is merit. It just isn't enough to erase boundaries, structural boundaries. It's kind of crazy. But, like, one can have two thoughts in the same, conflicting thoughts in their mind.
Yeah,
So
we do.
Yeah, but I'm saying like Pinu had an equality thought and a totally no way thought.
Yeah, well, when they announced that women were going to be fighting at Lumpini, which still has not happened, but it's been announced, he's not into it.
Yeah. But he brought the first visibly trans fighter into the Lumpini ring. That's no small thing. The guy is very sensitive about how his image is looked at.
He's actually incredibly proud of Angie. Like, still, like, when new people come to the gym, he, like, brings them over to the wall. Angie was ours. Like,
yeah.
Very proud of her.
And then, just to tack this on at the very end, for everybody who's like, the eternal laws of Thai culture and don't try to erase tradition, when everybody didn't know whether Angie should go over the rope or under the rope, seriously, we all think she's a man, he's a man, right? Legally, morally, therefore should go over the rope, but presents as a woman under the rope. Thai, they turned to the greatest gender tradition expert in the history of Thailand, Sylvie, and asked Sylvie what she thought. They were going to listen to Sylvie, this Westerner.
It's not they were, it's they did.
They were like, we can't figure out this issue. Let Sylvie decide.
And I have
Which
this,
is
like,
so crazy.
HAL 5000 breakdown about, like, policing myself as an authority. It was, like, so horrible.
And what did you decide?
I told them Nontomb goes over.
Do you feel some guilt?
So I used a reference.
You feel some guilt about saying that?
No, because I don't think that women would have gotten anything out of Angie going under. Instead, it would have just been a, like, if you identify as a woman, why don't you self-degrade and go down?
Hey, it has like a weird. But when you said this, I just listened. I just went on precedent on Nontomb. You sounded like you were deflated by that you had done that. You weren't like, I listened to Nontomb. Like,
I would never have reached the conclusion that she should go under. If it turned out that Angie had some kind of, like, Kaiser Sose story about herself and was actually born a woman and is not trans at all, I'm still telling her to go over. Like, I don't advise going under based on my things, other than that, as things are, the way the culture is, the way tradition is now, do it this way. She's not being disrespectful by going over,
Right.
because of how Thais
Thais
see
view.
trans.
Yeah.
If you are a Tom, for example, you fucking go under. You don't get to
Yeah.
go over as a Tom.
Yeah.
Loma did in Australia.
Yeah, I didn't want to say that, but
I'll say it. She
Yeah.
forgets that she did, but
yeah, that's true. In
I saw
interviews,
it.
she says she goes under, but she went over. She had that moment. I wonder how she feels about that. Honestly, maybe she felt bad about it or something. But in a Western context, in a pro fight, she decided to go over. And Loma's the Tom.
Oh, yeah.
We're talking about Toms, so very famous Thai female fighters are Toms. So I don't know. There's this beautiful story. It's one of the like buried stories of your experiences that you're actually have been very, very close to this gender divide, and it's kind of cool.
while riding
talk
the
about it very
cisgender
much.
thing all the time.
What does it mean, riding?
I have my own like personal gender things as well. Like gender for a non-cis male is just super complicated.
I'm confused. I didn't follow that.
I'm saying that I have my nose against the gender issue all the time, but you're
Your
saying
own
the
experiences.
transgender issue.
Yeah, but not only that, Petchy Jaw.
Yeah.
We saw Petchy Jaw climbing through the ropes at her gym when she's
When no
supposed to
one's
go
looking.
under. When no one looks, she would climb through the ropes. Her little 13-year-old Tom identity.
Do it quickly. Like, they're cute.
Yeah, I still remember that.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. Okay. Last one. All right. The last topic is something that Sylvie and I have talked about in the past. Well, I think we were prepping for this, and I was actually surprised that we didn't 100% agree. So, in talking about this, I kind of still want to find out how we don't agree on this.
Point, counterpoint.
I don't know. I'm still confused about what your position is on it. But I firmly believe, that serious female fighters, like when you go into, like, I want to be a fighter and I want to be the best fighter I can be, and I'm going to think for myself how good I can be. I think that kind of fighter, female fighter, should think to be able to beat men. Train, like, like when you're reaching for that mountaintop, you're not thinking that you want to beat a particular female fighter who's the best fighter in your mind at this time or better than some historic fighter, but you should be aiming to beat men and even think to yourself, who is the best man in my weight class? I want to be good enough to beat that person.
And you mean not theoretically, you mean that there should actually be intergender fighting?
No, that's a different story. This is just taking aim. If you don't take aim, there can be no fight.
And
Right,
to be clear, because we're just talking about
well, this
trans,
comes upon the issue of
people
gender.
love to fight about trans issues, about female bones and blah, 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 bone density, da, 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 da. Kevin is talking about all female, all male. Like, this is not just a, like,
cis.
like, I should look at who is the best male in my weight class, and my goal should be to be able to beat him.
Yes, like that, and not just you, but a 14 or 15-year-old Western girl training in her gym, setting the sights on who she would want to be able to be so good she could beat. That when you're aiming, when you're North Starring, that should not only be defined by your gender. And I'm very surprised that you don't 100% agree with me, because I'm not actually talking about actual fights. I'm talking about picturing how good you want to become. And I even go so far as, like, if you got proficient, like let's say you're a very advanced female pro fighter, thinking about, like, picture who would be like the number one, let's say, Lumpini fighter in my weight class, and then thinking to yourself, what kind of fighter would I have to beat them? And even training to acquire the skills. Like, there was a Raja Damnaran fighter, Raja Damnaran champion
Almost
at Sylvie's weight, 105 pounds.
It's the lowest weight of the stadium.
Yeah, they don't have 100-pound belts. He was a Japanese fighter, a very protected fighter. Like, in my view, it was a very protected series of belts he got, and he is very kickboxery, not good in clinch. And I'm honestly like, that fighter, he's since have gotten bigger, and he's gone back to Japan and does a lot of mixed promotions. It's not important about who he was, but I looked at this guy because I wasn't looking for him. I was actually looking at who holds the belt at 105.
Which is, in and of itself, a weird assumption that that's the best fighter.
It's not weird.
Well, no, it's the standard assumption, but we know that that's not actually the case. So your argument is that
Well,
I should actually look for the best male fighter, not the one that has the belt.
Maybe, but it was a shorthand. It was a shorthand way to be like we don't know 1,500-pound male fighters. We don't know the weight class. We don't know it. So I was like, to myself, I was like, well, it doesn't matter. You pick the belt. You go to the belt because that is officially the best fighter in the weight class. Mm-hmm. He holds the belt. And the national stadium belts are the standard of excellence in Thailand.
They're meant to be.
Yeah. They are the standard of excellence.
Yeah.
You hold the belt, even if you have a powerful gym behind you or whatever it is, it's a standard. It's a stamp of excellence. So the point was starting to think about how to beat somebody, regardless of their gender, is a positive thing.
But it's not regardless of their gender. You're saying that women should look at men as the a priori superior fighter and try to beat him. You're not saying that men should look at the best female fighter and try to beat her.
Okay. I already take as a base assumption, men are better fighters than women. The best male fighter in a weight class is better than the best female fighter in a weight class. And the average male fighter in a weight class is better than the average female
and so
fighter.
the best woman in that weight class,
yes,
being sub even an average male fighter in her same weight class, or not being as good as a man, she should theoretically aim to beat him without ever actually having a fight to settle that.
I didn't say that. When did I say that? I said it's a separate issue. One, you set your standards and your goals. Mm-hmm. You evolve yourself, and then maybe there is a possibility of a fight. But you don't do it because there's a fight. It's a question of goal setting, expanding yourself.
But if there's never actually a fight, how does that actually improve that woman?
Because you acquire skills you wouldn't otherwise have to have.
How? If you're fighting against other mediocre women?
I never say mediocre.
Well, you're saying that all women are worse than all men.
No, they are not as good.
Yeah.
But my honest to God point is the differences between the quality of female fighting and male fighting isn't gender-based at all. It's not biological. It's sociological. Just like we saw with Pet G Jaw, the opportunities for growth, training, fighting opportunities, development of one's Muay are stunted in females. Mm-hmm. So because of that sociological bias that stunts them, they don't develop full. So they have to ideally, you set standards that go beyond your social circumstances, go beyond your opportunities. As a female fighter, we've seen this with the Fairtex girls, you can just spam the right hand and beat everybody. Like win, 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 win. It's not a very evolved fighting style. But you take advantage of the fact that female fighters don't have as sophisticated a defense of their head. So you're aiming to win fights, but you're not aiming to evolve yourself beyond the conditions that you find yourself in. You look so angry with me. Are you just insulted that I'm assuming that female fighters are not as good of fighters as men?
No, actually, this is the interesting thing. I agree with you. I do not think that the best female fighter is as good as the best male fighter for the same reasons that you believe.
Okay, so we're on the same page.
Yes. My problem is by internalizing this inferiority, by being like, you should set your goals to theoretically beat the best male because that's the actual best, standard best. I don't think that mentality solves the sociological issues that make it so that female fighters are not as good as male fighters.
Well, it solves it if you actually...
It is better than the whole fucking bone density shit. We just need to get rid of that crap.
Okay, but you're not going to change society. All you can do is change your opportunities.
That doesn't change your opportunities unless you actually get to fight men.
Well, first of all, it does. For instance, if we're just taking this Japanese fighter who was awful in clinch never fought clinch fighters that I remember, or if he did, it was short-lived. He is a kickboxer. There was a weakness in this male fighter, to me. Clinch fighters can beat good strikers because they just take away the distance. If you took it upon yourself to make your clinch so strong that you could overwhelm an excellent kickboxing male fighter who's weak in clinch, but also bigger than you, like it was 105 pounds, so he probably walks at 112 or something. It's a huge ask. This is a huge ask. But there's a big difference between a huge ask and, my God, do not ever think about that. How dare you? Like, there's a huge difference. If you took it on your project, as a project, to develop your clinch game so strong that you could beat an excellent kickboxing Muay Thai fighter who's weak in the clinch, your clinch would be so strong, no female would be able to stand in front of you.
But why would you not, like, pick Tonadit or something? Who's actually an incredible, like, I want to beat a clinch fighter.
He's not in your weight.
He was. He fought at 105.
Okay, but it's stepping stones. First, you get your clinch game so good that you could beat a kickboxing Muay Thai fighter. Next, after you achieve that excellence, whether or not you ever fight him, you achieve that excellence for yourself. You make it your goal to do this thing that nobody will ever think of. You develop your skills. Your skills go boom, 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 boom. You clinch 2 hours a day, 3 hours a day. You study clinch techniques. You evolve your clinch game. Listen to me. You change as a fighter because of that goal. Whether you have that fight ever, doesn't matter, because then you ladder up your next goal. You're like, I want to beat the best clinch fighter at my weight.
Which is a man.
Which is a man. Historically, this is not essentially as a man. In 2021, it's a male fighter. That's another goal. How does my Muay get so good that now I could fight the best clinch fighter? That's even a harder ask, because clinch fighters have an advantage. They can nullify striking. If their defense is good enough and their Dern is good enough, clinch fighters they have a rock, paper, scissors advantage over strikers. But my point is, these are just artificial goals that allow you to escape the historical conditions in which you find yourself in. You find yourself in a gym where you have to ask for sparring and clinching. Even a gym that takes you very seriously. That's your historical condition. In order to become better, you have to sometimes, like we do, go find sparring and clinching somewhere else, in another gym, because you want to get better than the historical conditions will allow you.
What does that have to do with women as a whole should, in order to improve themselves, take as truth that they have to beat the man that's actually holding the pin for the best in their weight class?
Well, first of all, there's nothing women have to do. I'm just saying that if you're a serious woman, there is no reason to categorically remove the best fighter on the planet in your weight class. There's no reason to do that. The only reason to do that is because you are told that women cannot fight men. Ever. Ever. We know for a fact that's not true.
Yeah, I know. I get that you're saying this as this, like, rallying cry, like...
It's not a rally cry.
Women should aim higher kind of thing.
Yeah, but it's not a rallying cry.
But I'm challenging you because you, as a white man who has never been told that there's anything above you,
Okay.
don't have the internalized
Yeah, but
inferiority
but
to anything.
Yes, but as a white man, I can advise you that somebody has got you to internalize limits, and you think they're your own idea. Like,
No, I'm saying that your idea actually underlines that
no,
cultural treatment and
not
teaching.
at all. Okay, if you want to rephrase this, find the best fighter in the world at your weight class and make it your goal to beat that person. I don't care if it's a man or a woman. I'll tell you, it's going to be a man. Historically, now at this time in 2021. But I don't care if it's a man or a woman. 200 years from now, 300 years from now, find the best person in your weight class and train to beat them. Train. I don't care if it's a man or a woman. Maybe it's a woman 300 years from now. Already men and women are competing on these entertainment Muay Thai shows. The best fights on the show are women.
Yeah.
Women are competing with men, not physically. They're competing expressively. They're the most exciting fights. They are bringing their heart more than the man. Like Super Champ, women are the headline. Mm-hmm. Sao Sing is the headline. Mm-hmm. Stamp is a headline on one. Already they're competing. They're not in the ring yet, but they actually are competing economically.
That's a completely different competition than I'm aiming to beat a man at my weight.
Absolutely not, because your economic position should rely on your performance as a fighter.
No, because if you're saying that the pool of female talent, right? So say I'm on a card with a man that we're like close in size, whatever. The opponent I have to beat to be a superstar versus the opponent he has to beat to be a superstar are not on the same level as each other.
Yeah, but I'm saying...
So if you're competing for like superstardom, sure, it's theoretical.
Yeah, but you're already taking for granted something that wasn't even conceivable 5 years ago. There was no way that Sao Sing was going to compete with a man.
When Ronda Rousey was like, I could fight Mayweather, people laughed their asses off.
I don't care. She wasn't a boxer. It was a part of her branding. Let her think what she wanted. But I would be. It's crazy to me because.
Could she be a superstar like Mayweather? Sure, if she fucking.
Yeah, but we're at a point in history where. Let's put it this way: Ronda Rousey probably would have turned out to be a better fighter in the UFC if she wasn't just focused on beating other women. If she actually...
Well, she actually had experience competing against men in judo. They have mixed gender in judo.
But I'm talking about as an MMA fighter.
Okay.
So her problem she ran into is that she had developed her game in a very narrow path, which was based on beating a less developed talent pool. And she was very successful. But she was not expanding herself as an MMA fighter. You have so much anger towards me on this. It's so crazy. To me, this is the same argument as telling a young Barack Obama that he should, when he thinks about what he should be, being president is something he should think of. And then someone saying, but you're not understanding the situation. He can't become president. There's never been a president. This is not, you're making a white man's achievement your achievement. And I'm like, you shouldn't set a ceiling on yourself, especially a gendered ceiling.
No.
It's something that is so...
The reason I'm mad is because what you're describing is, rather than the feel-good, take away all of the actual political reasons this isn't possible, telling a little kid you can be whatever you want to be. That's beautiful. What you're saying is specifically you should tell that kid the only people worth competing with are white men.
I didn't say that.
I'm saying that that's what you're saying to me when you're like, women should think to beat the best man in their weight class.
Well, obviously, as a female fighter, you'd also be training to beat all the women. You don't just have one goal. You have the goal of improving yourself. When you set goals for yourself, it's a constellation of goals. You were fighting every week, every 2 weeks. Your goals were to win those fights and improve yourself as a fighter. But you also set goals like becoming a Yod Moi. How many female Yod Moi are there?
None.
So you have set a completely gendered goal for yourself. For yourself.
Because Yod Moi is an achievement that's not, I have to beat Karahat.
Yeah,
It's like,
but this is the thing. It's one thing to have a dream, like I just want to be the best in the world, or some vague idea. But you understand fighters are constructed. And when a female fighter finds themselves in a rigid sociological system, and Thailand is open to female fighters in a lot of ways, but it's also very rigid in hidden ways that we're not aware of right away. The social conditions towards excellence of a female fighter do not exist in Thailand. The way we define excellence, the way you define excellence, they do not exist. So if you just follow the social conditions, the opportunities that are made, which involve also goal setting, like trying to be the best female fighter in your weight class in Thailand, or win on this promotion, all these kinds of natural goal settings, you are restricting what you're capable of building in yourself. If your clinch is good enough to beat female fighters everywhere, why get better? Work on something else. You look at me with such disdain.
Because it's so dismissive.
Why? Why? Dismissive of who? Is not your clinch.
You're basically saying, not directly,
Right.
but ultimately what you are saying is that as a female fighter, if you climb to the top of the hill was such shit
I never say
that it's
shit.
like not even on par with.
I did not say that. You turn these terms like it's on tape. You're the one who puts the like charged negative terms in there. It's a matter of excellence, a ladder of excellence. You set for yourself a Yod Moi goal of excellence. That Yod Moi is beyond any male fighter now.
Because being Yod Moi is so not the same as I want to get this belt in a completely unranked, chaotic organization of achievement. Yod Moi is like a...
Yeah, but by saying Yod Moi, you actually are asking yourself to be a fighter that's better than any active fighter now other than Sanchai. You are aiming beyond every male who's currently fighting, but you are horrified by the idea that I should say you should pick an actual male and try to imagine building yourself as a fighter who would beat that person. Like, I am like, okay.
Because Karahat is not Yod Moi because he beat Silipatai that time. He's Yod Moi because of the collection of his
Yeah, but his Yod Moi
movements and achievements and fighting up and all of the
yeah,
things
but
that he
his
did.
Yod Moi-ness produced actual victories. He wasn't in a Ra Moi
Yeah, but
contest.
you don't like...
He wasn't in a Ra Moi contest. He wasn't a dancer doing a performance art. His Yod Moi-ness came out of his ability to beat fighters that were bigger than him, that had advantages, that were also Yod Moi. Like, his Yod Moi-ness
Yeah, and
came out
I
of
do
that.
all those things, but unless I beat a man in my weight class
I never
who's
say that.
better...
I never say there's an unless. I am like, do not put a gendered, historically defined ceiling of what you should aim for. Plus, I think it's actually beneficial in a pure training sense, like actually improving as a fighter, that you take goals of specific males who have strengths and weaknesses, you take goals and you use that figure to shape you and to set the bar much higher. To set the goal, the bar much higher for skill competence. There's no negative on this. If you don't reach it, you still improved yourself. Like you've stretched beyond what is being asked of any female fighter. What female fighter is thinking to themselves, okay, yeah, this would take out pretty much every female fighter, but it's just not good enough. I need to end that combination with a very nasty low kick. You don't have to add that low kick if you're fighting, let's say the female fighters in your weight class. Your combination, if you keep on it, keep pushing that combination, you're probably going to win. I'm like, build for the end guy. Well, I'm sorry that the video end guy happens to be male. It's not important that it's male. It's the standard, it's the level.
Why does that not sound to you like a white person being like, I don't see color?
Because who historically holds the position of excellence is simply contingent on history. So you set your goal within the confines of history, but the only way to break out of history is to ignore those chains, to create opportunities. How many times have people been like, Sylvie, you fought enough. I don't even know why you're fighting anymore. You're already famous, Yokumpon. You're already famous.
Every day.
Yeah, all the time. You're already going way beyond the bounds of what should be expected of a female. And you're always told, why are you even fighting?
Because,
what age are you?
Because you're telling me to gender it, whereas it's not gendered.
I literally told you, take the gender out of it. Find the best. He will happen to be a male because of his history. Find the best fighter on the planet and think how to beat them. It is even conceivable to be like, okay, not even Muay Thai, the best MMA fighter. I'm not an MMA fighter, but how would I beat an MMA fighter? It's setting up a context for skill building, which will require you to get much more proficient at certain skills than you would otherwise need. You could just get away with a lower standard. But because you're trying to transcend your historical condition, you have to go beyond setting bars that are determined by history. If you just go by what's determined by history, you will be trapped by history. What is so crazy is this is just an experiment, a mental experiment. We already know
why
Sylvie.
even pick, like, I have to be able to beat that fighter? Why don't you be like, I want to be able to beat any kind of fighter?
I don't know what that means. What does that mean, any kind of fighter? Like a bouncer at a bar?
No, not like street fighting. Like, if you're like, you will never have to defeat that low kick because no woman will ever throw that low kick at you, but some male fighter
might. Yeah.
Pornsene has an incredible low kick. How would I beat Pornsene?
Yeah.
Why don't you just in your head be like, how do I defeat someone who throws a low kick at me, rather than like,
okay,
there's a male fighter
that's a perfect example. Perfect example, because when you're building skills theoretically, like in a video game, that's not the same. It's not concrete enough. It's not concrete enough. I'm not fighting a low kick in a video game. You're like, how does this person, whoever they are, male, female, how does this person set up their low kick? They always fucking throw that jab. Jab, jab, low kick. Okay, let me hone in on jab, jab, low kick. Let me get the low kick destroyer.
That's got nothing to do with even the best in your weight class. That's just every kind of fighter.
Yes, but when somebody is the best at your weight class, whoever they are, if they're the belt holder, they have a stamp of excellence, which means they are doing some things in the ring, the actual ring, that are very successful. There are problems to solve. It is like doing a maze or a puzzle. I'm saying pick someone and use it like a fucking word puzzle. How would I, in my skill set, develop my skills sharply enough that I could beat that puzzle? Because there's no complete fighter.
And so you see this as like a super feminist, all opportunities thing to say that like women should not glass ceiling themselves to the capacity of female fighters.
I'm not trying to be super feminist. I just happen to be a feminist because of how I care about women and I care about you. I'm not like trying to
I'm not
virtue
questioning
signal
your feminism. I'm
Joe
saying
Rogan.
that when you say women should have this aim in order to take themselves seriously.
Because this is a good combo.
When you phrase it as that women should aim for men as a sign of their non-self limitations.
There's no signaling. It's within your own self. It's like, as a fighter, I think it's healthy to take specific fighters as puzzles to be solved, to challenge yourself to develop skill sets that would counter other skill sets. But in real fighters, like for instance, Sao Sing, beating Sao Sing would be a worthy puzzle to solve, which could then cause you to develop skill sets you wouldn't otherwise have. She's 60 kilos. You wouldn't fight her. Maybe you could fight her. You fought 60 kilo fighters. You have developed tons of Muay Thai skills fighting women that are way beyond bone density, muscle mass differences that people worry about with genders. 60 kilo girls you fight, 58 kilo girls you fight. You have developed a Muay that is able to fucking like counter, size, kicking, specific skill sets with huge weight disadvantages that no female fighter in history has faced. And I think you're a much better female fighter because you took on those challenges that simply before you, no female fighter would ever have taken on. This is a progression of the exact same thought. The only difference is it crosses a gender boundary, which is highly ideological. This is very ideologically framed. For you, of course I should try to fight a 56 kilo or 58, beat a 58 kilo, a 60 kilo girl. This is a worthy goal. It's hard. There's things I have to be really, really good at. You can't be like okay in clinch and fight a 60 kilo girl and win. What is the practical difference of picking Sao Sing, who's 60 kilos, and thinking, how would I beat Sao Sing, to beating a 100-pound skilled male? Why is one so don't ever think about that, and the other is, yeah, that could be something I could think about?
Because you've already placed one as a superior goal to the other.
No.
One is a specific person with a specific set of skills.
I never said superior.
The other is...
I never said superior
some like
goal.
Nameless...
There's no superior goal. You have many goals as a fighter. This is a puzzle that's worth taking on. I'm not saying this is the ideal goal of a female fighter. I'm never saying like this is what should define you, whether or not you're able to do it or anything. As a female fighter, you take on many specific puzzles. You try to solve your pad man. You try to solve your sparring partner. You try to solve this fighter you've fought 3 times. There's hopefully you're honing skills that solve very concrete puzzles. The reason why I'm talking about very specific this male fighter, I'm like, this male fighter will have certain things they do really well, and it's very healthy to be like, how could I defeat that? Like that, there's no reason. We have arranged a male-female fight. Tara fought an experienced, not highly skilled, but experienced male fighter. She had what, 10 pounds on him, maybe?
Yeah, I don't know.
10 or 15, she was bigger. Beat him pretty solidly. This idea that women should never even think of fighting men is the same kind of like mind control that comes from hierarchy,
but that
social hierarchy.
Tara fighting that guy is not the same thing as what you're saying of Tara should find the man at her weight who's the best and aim to be able to
Tara is not a high volume professional fighter, but that's the first step. You know that you have handled Thai boys that are bottom rung stadium fighters already.
Yes.
In the ring.
Yes.
In the sparring ring.
That are bigger than
you know that you can beat that male who's a stadium fighter. You're already there.
Yeah, but that's not the best.
Okay, but I'm saying you've already crossed over into the land of the men. The land of the men has been stepped on. You're already on that turf. So this idea that gender is even an issue, it's not even an issue anymore. You're already on the other side of the line. I'm saying it's healthy to take on that puzzle. Like, To me, we think differently too, but to me it's very interesting, like, how would you beat Sanchai? You're not gonna fight Sanchai. But I came up with a theory, how to beat Sanchai. Load him with low kicks. If you decided, how would I beat Sanchai? And you're like, he probably doesn't condition his legs very much. He's so fucking tricky. If I fight him in space, I'm dead. I'll never fight him because we're not the same size and it'll never happen. But if you developed a nasty low kick game that might cause serious problems, like just in fantasy world, you've made yourself a better fighter. You've solved a puzzle that isn't the same if you took the puzzles only from people in your gender. If you want to make, how would I beat Wang Chinoi? Like, okay, that's another thing. But I think there's also something that's like beneficial for women to take a male that's in their time in history, who is acknowledged as the best in their weight class by some formal means, and be like, I could maybe beat that person. People, unfortunately, the way it's handled on the internet and breakdowns, Lucia Riker fighting Somchai Jaidi, this New Zealand guy, and this fight that she lost was pictured as this muscle mass disparity, and she could never, it was so ridiculous. The reason why she lost that fight had absolutely nothing to do with muscle mass or bone density. It would have been worthy for her to train after that fight, to think, how would I beat that fighter for a rematch? Whether or not she fought them again. She would have become a better fighter if she saw, what does that fighter do well that I don't respond well to?
So then you're not actually talking about a woman pinpointing a man in her weight class who's seen as the best and thinking, how do I beat him? You're talking about who is there to see, which is male fighters, and how would I beat?
Yes, but I also am talking about specifically targeting a specific man who's at your weight class, and the reason why it's a weight class is you could physically actually get in a ring with them if the laws of culture allowed. There is an immediacy about it. If you're like, how would I beat Wang Chinoi? This is a little bit more fantasy-like, is less concrete. When you're actually talking about male fighters in your weight, Muay Thai is all about advantages and disadvantages and finding ways to put people in positions where they're not comfortable, where they don't like to fight. Every fighter has it. Any advantage that a male fighter has on a female fighter physically, let's say it's 5%, 10% on average, that advantage can be totally taken away technically if you, as a female fighter, put the fight where they don't want it.
Yeah, that's what Muay Thai is.
This is what Muay Thai is. So I am like, it is beneficial for a female fighter to think about an actual male fighter, real fighter, and be like, how could I put the fight where they don't want it? And I think it's also healthy to think that this is possible. Like, women, any minority group, part of what holds them in place is they're told, often without actually being told, they're raised to think certain things are possible and other things are not possible. Part of the problem with picking an actual male fighter that lives in your own time and is right there as a goal is that there is this weird, like, push down on the mind that literally erases the ability to think of what is possible. It's a ceiling.
Theoretically, I agree with you, but what you're saying to me further internalizes female inferiority.
But you already
see it as the opposite.
But you already internalized this.
Yeah, baby, you're starting from where women actually are in the world. We're actually already in the patriarchy.
But there's no internalization. It's the fact of culture. It is the opportunities.
Yeah, you're like, women should just start thinking more like men. It's hard for women to think like men given the fucking world we live in.
I agree, but women will not have the opportunity to actually change themselves. Like, a lot of what we do with you is we set goals way beyond history.
Yeah.
like fucking 2-3 times what history asks of a woman, a Western fighter, anybody. And we use these goals as like North Stars to produce qualities to build a fighter that goes way beyond what would have happened.
Yeah, I get it. I'm like, I want to beat Len Wickwar. It's not who's the woman with the most. It's just the most. And you go. It happens to be a man. I get it.
Yeah.
But you're talking about a way more like day-to-day disparity that as a woman, I'm letting you know the reason there's a counterpoint is that I actually experience these that doesn't feel healthy. Whereas you're like, you should just think this way. It's very healthy. It's very like everyone's equal.
I'm not saying it's easy to do this, but the very fact that you have a sensor that's like, don't think this, means that you're already oppressed in your ability to imagine what is possible. Like, to me, there's no doubt in my mind that if you trained and developed yourself over the next 3 years to beat the best male fighter in your weight class, it's totally possible. I'm not saying it actually would happen, but it's totally possible. If you, 3 years, you made this your goal. I'll say this also, if you did not fight that person or you fought that person and lost, the fighter you would be at the end of that process would be really, really good. Because you're holding yourself to bars that are higher. You are demanding that your ability to defend yourself or counter certain weapons or impose yourself reach up beyond what they would otherwise be. You do this every day actually when you spar with your kumpan, a legend of the golden age, who has rhythms and patterns and a big weight advantage on you. It's like 60 kilos. You're constantly exposing yourself to a superiority that is beyond the bar setting that many other fighters do.
Yeah, but when I achieve something, I'm not like, oh my God, I got that on a man. I'm like, oh my God, I got that on Yod Kumpan.
I don't care about it being a man. Honestly, I know I only bring up the male part because that's the loaded part. That is the ideologically loaded part. The whole argument against trans fighters and like, if a man ever beat on my daughter who I don't even have, I would kill him, whatever. This whole concept is really based on this idea that women can't even fight men.
Well, what makes you think that that's not happening in a very mundane way anyway? I don't train with other women. There are not other women for me to train with. So when I spar with Dee or Alex or Yod Kumpan and I'm having a fucking internal thing that I'm like, I can't get this on them, it's driving me crazy. Yeah. I'm not giving myself, oh, well, you're a woman, which a trainer will say to you. Yeah. I'm not like, oh, he outweighs me by 20 kilos.
Right.
I just hate that I can't do that thing.
100%.
So what's making you think that there aren't women, because women are generally very sparse in gyms around, that they're not comparing themselves to the other woman in their gym? They're like, I want to beat Dan, who's this guy she trains with every day, not because he's a man, but because that's her training partner.
I'm saying great. On top of that, pick 5 fighters you want to be able to beat. One of them be the best male in your weight class. It's not sacrilege. Honestly, this is the thing. You're so indoctrinated. You're so indoctrinated.
I don't want to talk about this anymore.
It makes you very stressful.
It's too stressful.
This is what I'm saying. Women are not allowed to even think or dream. I'm just saying, think or dream. The possibility is so fucking loaded that women are not allowed to even think it, which is fucked up. It's fucked up. Boys are raised, I could beat anyone. I could beat Bukao. I could beat Bruce Lee. That's how boys are raised. There's no ceiling on their dream, on their thought of their excellence, their possible excellence.
Yeah, but that's also like with like, so there's no fucking inferiority
It's not like
complex.
with like. Westerners come to fight Thais. They're not Thai. They're Westerners. They started late. They're chasing an impossibility in a way, but they set it in their mind. I'm just saying the freedom of dream, that women are not even allowed to have the fantasy. We know this. You had this thing with Nii Shobo where he's like dreaming. Like, women are not allowed to take this travel. And I'm like, not even a travel, it's not even a fantasy. It's like setting up a puzzle to solve. Like we've talked about it. I think you should aim to beat the best female fighter in the world no matter her weight. Like for real beat. Like if that's Sao Sing or Smilla or Jija, whoever it is, the best female fighter, that's a worthy goal. To be at 100 pounds, and what would I have to do to put that fight where they don't want it for 5 rounds? You would have to develop tremendous skills to be able to try to do that. That is a worthy goal. When I talk about that, you look at me and you smile because it makes you feel warm. When I talk about the other one,
I don't feel warm.
Baby, the smile on your face.
Why don't you advise men to be like, you should aim to beat someone 5 weight classes up from you?
If I had friends that were men and were fighters, I could do that. I don't think that would be a...
So then within the same advice that women should be thinking of the best man that they could beat, they should also be thinking of women outside of their own weight classes that they should beat.
Well, I don't know. Should. I'm like, it depends how developed you are as a fighter. One I'm thinking of is, what are girls thinking that they could do when they first get intoxicated by the sport? Like, I want to be a world champion. Like whenever that thought is hitting you, I don't know if you're 14 years old, 16 years old, whatever, you're like, I want to be WBC champion. I want to wear the gold belt, the green belt. Whenever that's happening, I would be like, it would be cool if you also thought, I want to be able to beat this male. Like, that is on the menu of what could be possible. I think that's cool. So that's the first thing, when the dream is percolating. And then the other thing is when you're a very advanced fighter, start setting goals beyond what is expected. Not just beating the best females in your weight class. Like Mayweather, I mean not Mayweather,
Pacquiao?
no. But Pacquiao went way up. This is a typical male thing.
got like
Up.
8 weight classes.
But also Evander Holyfield, when he went up, The heavyweight champion, of course, is the glory weight class anyways, but reach beyond your conditions. It's a typical kind of male progressive thing. I am like, because the opportunities and the conditions for development for women are so limited. They're built out and they're developed in pockets. There's like, if you get with this...
they're incredibly circumspect. They're like, you're in this box.
Yeah, but it's like, if you get with this gym that embraces women and has good trainers and has connections to promotions that will give you a world title, that's a good pocket. Like, that's a fucking good pocket. Or if you're training with Thai boys all the time and your gym is respecting you and giving you work, that's a good pocket. But none of these pockets are connected to each other, really. They are like so undeveloped that women have to create, they have to jerry-rig their opportunities and their challenges. They can't take cues from the messaging that's around them. Because the messaging is just fit in this area. Create excellence that is in this area. Get this belt.
So if you're Miss Nebraska, aim to be Miss Universe.
Yeah, or like if you're Don Kong Fa, I want to go over to 1 and beat Stamp. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
I love you. You have such resistance to this.
Y'all got to see the real conversations we have.
We have very nice conversations. But it's so crazy because you're beating fucking stadium boys already in real, like...
Yeah, but they're not the best of anything.
It doesn't matter. You're already on the map.
Yeah.
Once you're on the map, then you could be like, I want to go to here on the map. Before, women are not even allowed on the map. There's no map. Their map is over here.
Yeah, I got it.
I love you.
I love you. I'm tired.
All right. Ready for the music? Cue music.
No, you have to say thank you and those things.
Okay, you say thank you. Those things.
Thank you to my patrons.
I hope this
who make
wasn't
all
a
this
crazy,
possible.
like we went all over the
I
place.
hope it was crazy. I hope people are like, I've never heard anything like this.
Thank you for listening and supporting us and our like weird, unique perspective on Muay Thai and what's possible.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, was that bad?
No.
Okay.
No.
So you can become a patron if you're watching this on YouTube, and you get the audio subscription in the Muay Thai Library.
You get notes as a patron as well.
Yeah. Get the merch. It goes to the Legends. It's nonprofit for us.
Also, if you're not into like shirts and shorts, or if you already have the shirts and shorts, actually people have been saying they really like the Carhat shorts, which makes me happy because I love the Carhat shorts.
Totally.
But Kevin also has the moynoir.com, which is photographs that he takes, and
thank you, baby.
The profits from his photos go to the subjects of that photo. So if it's Diesel Noi, it goes to Diesel Noi. If it's Carhat, it goes to Carhat. If it happens to be of me or something like that, we actually just feed that back into the project and send free prints to like
whomever, or we could throw it in the crew fund too if we don't send a photo.
They're gorgeous though. They're really beautiful. We have some really big ones here that we're like trying to figure out how to hang up, but
yeah, I like that one Diesel Noi that what's his name bought.
Yeah,
I forgot his name.
Pops.
Pop? What? Don't. I can't hear you.
I can't say his name on Instagram because it's unpronounceable.
Oh yeah, it's an Instagram name.
Yeah.
He has got a photo of Diesel Noi that's just like one of my favorite photos.
Yeah. Don't cry.
Makes me want to cry.
Miss Diesel Noi.
Yeah. Okay. Cue music.
Da, 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 da.
Da-na-na.
Da, 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 da.
Thank you.